So, what is the Catholic position on the Crusades, and where are the Crusader kings actually buried? So, I want to thank some of the kids in my church who asked me to make a video on the Crusades. As in response to it. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, the Catholic position on crusading is actually firmly established both by St. Thomas Aquinas and by Pope Leo X's bull Exsurge Domini. St. Thomas Aquinas does say that yes, you can have a holy war. However, there are rules. It is a war in defense of the liberty of the church. That is the notion of it according to the Summa. I will try to remember to post the link down below. I always forget. Please, if I forget, please remind me and I'll post it. Secondly, and also in Exsurge Domini, one of the errors of Martin Luther condemned by the church was that it is a sin to have a holy war and a crusade against the Turks, as God is punishing us through the Turks, and we should just submit to the judgment of God rather than fight back. That was condemned by Pope Leo X in his bull Exsurge Domini. Now, of course, from a traditional Catholic perspective, we support the Crusades. We think the Crusades overall were a good thing and a just thing. That does not mean that everything that went on during the Crusades was good and just. My goodness gracious, no. So things like killing people who are praying in their synagogue or at their mosque or non-combatants. Things like that went on, and no, we're not okay with that. And as Catholics, we should not be okay with that. That does not mean that we should look with shame and disgust upon the Crusader kingdom. We should look upon it with great pride as a time of Christian chivalry when we would literally fight for the faith when it's absolutely necessary. That without further ado, that being said, what happened to the Crusader kings and where are they all buried? So, the first Crusader king of Jerusalem was actually not even a king. He refused the title and went with another title known as the Protector of the Holy Sepulchre. I'm of course talking about Godfrey de Bouillon. When he died, he was buried in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Spoiler: almost all of them are going to be buried in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which I'm not going to lie, my personal take on that is kind of pretentious. Thinking you should get to be buried where Jesus was buried. Just my take. There is an exception to that rule, though. So, but that was Godfrey de Bouillon. He refused to be crowned as king of Jerusalem, as I recall. His tomb, however, was destroyed long ago. However, his sword apparently can still be seen in the Holy Sepulchre today. Last I heard, I mind you, I just googled it. Got better information? Feel free to correct me. Second king of Jerusalem, King Baldwin I, Godfrey de Bouillon's brother, who was crowned as king of Jerusalem in the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. Baldwin I, a little bit more cocky, still cocky enough to want to be buried in the Christ tomb in Jerusalem, but still he was humble enough to say, I should not be crowned with a crown of gold in the same city where Christ was crowned with a crown of thorns. And when he died, he was buried in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and underneath Calvary. Yes, there are a number of chapels you could have been buried in. He chose to be buried in Calvary. I suppose it's a place of honor, but like Calvary. Third king of Jerusalem is Baldwin II, who married a woman from an Armenian Orthodox family, and eventually had a daughter to succeed him. When Baldwin II died, he was buried in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, of course. His successor was Melisende, Queen of Jerusalem, who was married twice to her husband Fulk and Baldwin III. Melisenda was buried in the tomb of the Virgin Mary. Yay! Melisenda was a little bit less cocky in her choice of burial, but her mother had been buried in the tomb of the Virgin Mary in the Kidron Valley, and she was chose to be buried next to her mother. Her co-rulers were her husband Fulk, who was buried in the Church Holy Sepulchre. And when he died, she later on married Baldwin III, who was buried in the Church Holy Sepulchre. And what is either Baldwin III's tombstone or that of his son from the Holy Sepulchre can be seen in the Terra Sancta Museum in Jerusalem today. Baldwin III was succeeded by Almaric I, who sought to invade Egypt and was buried in the Church Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. A lot of Crusader burials there. He was succeeded by Baldwin IV, who is famously a leprous king of Jerusalem. As you can see from the movie, the same guy, King of Heaven, with a mask on from the movie. That's him. And when he died, he was buried in the Church Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Of course. Now, when he died, he had his sister who was still living, and she had a son. Now, they wanted a male king, so they passed over Baldwin IV's sister, Sibylla of Jerusalem, who, spoiler, later on did actually become Queen of Jerusalem, at least briefly, and went to her son, Baldwin V, who was co-regent and co-heir with and co-ruled for a time with Baldwin IV. Baldwin V lived for about a year after Baldwin IV's death and was killed at Acre. And his body was taken and buried in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem. Yes, again. And his was the last time. His monument, however, survived till comparatively recently until a fire destroyed it in 1808. Now we get to the last two Crusader kings of Jerusalem. The last rulers of Jerusalem are, of course, Sibylla and her husband, Guy of Lusignan. Around this time, the Crusader kingdom was quickly coming to its end. Jerusalem fell to Saladin and eventually had to flee. The remnants of the Crusader kingdom at this point was based in Cyprus. Now, I was not able to find out where Sibylla of Jerusalem was ultimately buried. Her husband, Guy, who was technically the last king of Jerusalem, and notably, the only reason he was king was because of his wife Sibylla. So when she died, the throne passed to Sibylla. I think it was Sibylla's sister, either Sibylla's sister or cousin, Isabella I. But Guy of Lusignan was buried ultimately in the Knights Templar Church in Nicomedia on Cyprus, and he was the last king of Jerusalem to actively operate in Jerusalem. However, up to this day, I recall even the king of Spain does claim the title King of Jerusalem through marriage and some interesting succession laws. But yeah, that's a bit about the Crusades for you. So, hope you found this video interesting. God bless, have a great day. And let's say 3 Aves for the pose of all the Crusader kings and queens of Jerusalem without any exception. Ave Maria, gratia plena Dominus tecum, Precibus et benedictus Virtus Maris tui, Jesus, Sancta Maria Mater Dei, open nobis peccatoribus, nunc nostri, amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena Dominus tecum, Precibus et benedictus Virtus Maris tui, Jesus, Sancta Maria Mater Dei, open nobis peccatoribus, nunc nostri, amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena Dominus tecum, Precibus et benedictus Virtus Maris tui, Jesus, Sancta Maria Mater Dei, open nobis peccatoribus, nunc nostri, amen. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.